White went all the way. Near the top of Dave's list were Beat It, Right Now, and Jump. It seemed like your list began to gravitate toward the brilliance of Ed as a multi-layered musician. Between Right Now and Jump, Ed utilized his skills on keyboards and piano on both rhythm and lead guitar to support the creation of two beautifully crafted and successful hit songs. With Beat It, and I am a huge MJ fan by the way, we have Ed stepping outside the box and working with someone you wouldn't expect him to perform with. On a similar note, I love the songs Ed did with LL Cool J. It is interesting to note how Ed, as one of the greatest guitarists the world has ever known, has recorded with one of the greatest entertainers the world has ever known, MJ, and then years later created songs one of the greatest rappers the world has ever known, LL. Then number 2, thank you for including Beluga Theorem even as an honorable mention. There just isn't enough said about this song. I love the era when Sammy was in Van Halen. However, I was truly happy that he didn't have lyrics for this song. This song plays as if it was designed to be an instrumental. Lyrics by any singer, Dave, Sammy, Gary, or whomever, would have, in my opinion, diminished the greatness of that song. Like Maggot Brains by Funkadelic, by the way, it is a song I've often told people you must hear with the lights off, no visual distractions, and a great set of earphones on. This is music that takes you somewhere. Happy to hear you included it. Air Force J in Half Moon Bay. So, number 1. The song that LL did is 2 songs. It's very underrated. I love those. And I wanted to also mention to you, Air Force J, that the title of that thing was Top 10 Eddie Van Halen Moments. So it wasn't so much like guitar, whatever. I'm just saying his overall musical moments. I thought those were very important, the ones that I noted about Jump and Right Now. It's not so much the keyboard issue, but the significance of those musical moments. So keep that in mind. Beluga Theorem is very underrated, as well as stuck in the middle of a weird spot in the album, to be honest with you. It's a gem. There's no lyrics. It's not necessary. And every Van Halen album, in my opinion, should have an instrumental track like this. What do you think, Dave?
Interesting. That would have been nice. You have to write towards an instrumental. I don't think Ed wrote a lot towards instrumental songs.
Right.
So, could have been interesting, but that goes into what if territory. And so, that's all I got to say about that.
Okay. We are on to letter number 8, and that comes from Shannon the Dude. Dave, everybody with a nickname is coming out tonight. Hey, Daves, I never heard you mention these, and I'm sure you didn't know about them. Heard the Rock Solid podcast mention on their Eddie episode that the trio is doing sound checks, and Wolf is singing lead. Sent us some clips of Ed, Al, and Wolf performing at sound check, and he says tattoo is kind of cool. Kind of makes you think what the trio tour might have been like had they done one. And he also sent us another video. I almost went a month without emailing you. I just discovered this. Maybe Bruce should have replaced Dave. At least you would have sung the old songs. And there's a clip of Springsteen covering Jump. This is really solid somehow, he said. Shannon the Dude. Well, let me tell you, Shannon, the trio of Ed, Al, and Wolf always did sound checks together, and for some reason, Dave never did sound check. Isn't that strange?
Well, I guess he was saving his voice. I mean, I think Sam didn't show up at sound checks either sometimes, right?
I don't know. Maybe not. And well, I tell you, though, if you watch some of those sound checks, some of that stuff is gold because they would play some songs that they would never play on stage. Like they played As Is, which I was excited about.
Yeah,
Out of Love Again. They played a whole bunch of cool stuff. And there's some really great jams that you want to go out there and put some of those together in a playlist. If you want to check some really crunchy Van Halen stuff out, the sound checks on those 3 tours, 2007, 2008, and then the 2012 tour, and also the 2015 tour. There's some good sound checks in there, for sure. Bruce is a spirited fellow, so seeing him perform Jump is a lot of fun, but fronting Van Halen, I don't think so. What do you think, Dave?
I don't think that's going to work.
Absolutely.
It's right up there with Patti Smythe. That's all I got to say for that one.
Okay, letter number 9 comes from Joe Libro from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. After I sent you a letter, I was looking through the old episodes of your pod. Wouldn't you know, I caught Derek Fuller's interview, and wouldn't you know that I already listened to it. I have been listening since the beginning, so I listened to it again, and it was an incredible interview. I guess the thing was that I had not heard of Van Halen at the time and forgot all about it. You're right, Dave. How could I? LOL. Thanks again. Love the podcast, Joe Libro. So Joe wrote in and said, hey, why don't you do an interview with Derek Fuller from Van Halen, but we had already done it, and we pointed it out to him, and then he was just saying, oh, my God. So no worries, Joe. I just wanted to let you know that we were on the ball, and I'm glad you got to re-listen to it and you enjoyed that. What do you think, Dave?
Well, look, we can't remember everything, except if you're Midwest Ron, so
right,
don't worry. He'll do the research right in and correct us all.
Well, he's underground in his underground lair, and he just, in
his bunker.
Exactly. In his bunker where he's tracking everything that happens. Believe it or not, Dave, we are on to our last letter, letter number 10, and this comes from Kurt 5150 Snyder, and he says, Dave's, release the hounds. I think this unreleased product is a three-headed monster. Warner Brothers stuff, who knows? 5150 stuff is up to Al. I think it won't be a while. I'm sure Eddie told Al to wait until Wolfgang's album is out and promoted. Sammy said in an interview there are only like 2 unreleased worthy songs with Sammy, and Dave and Gary may want to release some stuff for some money. Love the show. Kurt 5150 Snyder. Well, Kurt, I think Sammy said 4 songs, but good point, Kurt. I think Kurt makes a good point that he probably did tell Al, why don't you wait until Wolf gets his album out there and maybe do something after that. That makes sense to me. In terms of the other guy's stuff, I really don't know. I don't know who controls it. I really don't, but I am giving up even worrying about what's at 5150 at this point. I think it's a moot point. I think it's going to be a very long time before any of that gets unearthed. We'll see what happens. In the meantime, like I mentioned, there's plenty of good stuff coming out from Dave, from Sam, from Gary, from Wolf, from Talus, all kinds of people putting out stuff. So we shall see what happens. What do you think, Dave?
I look forward to being pleasantly surprised. I hope we live long enough to see it.
Exactly. Well, that wraps up the mailbag segment. And we are on to our interview with author Martin Popoff of the new book, Van Halen, a Visual Biography, featuring over 400 photos through the years with memorabilia and all kinds of texts from Martin, followed by our interview with Bud Hathaway, author of What About the Fans, his memoir about going backstage with Van Halen and other bands. We get into all this stuff coming up next. Take a listen.
Trump becoming president because Obama made fun of him, that would be like, imagine if the head of linguistics at Rutgers made fun of David Lee Roth. And then David Lee Roth is like, I'm going to take your job, zibbly-bobbly-boop. And then he, spends a year and all this money, gets the job, goes cartwheeling into the linguistics department. Yeah, head of linguistics, everybody, Diamond Dave. Bring out the coke and the hookers. And then the guy's like, oh, no, we're going to be talking about the lack of recursion in 16th century Germanic poetry. And Dave's like, No? Nothing? Okay, that's fine.
Pick up the new coffee table-sized book, The Decade That Rocked, by legendary rock photographer Mark Weissguy Weiss. This 376-page book has hundreds and hundreds of full-color photos that Weiss shot through the 80s for magazines like Circus, Faces, and Hit Parader, featuring bands like Van Halen, Motley Crue, Twisted Sister, Bon Jovi, Skid Row, Guns N' Roses, Ozzy Osbourne, and more. There's even behind-the-scenes stories to go with these colorful, eye-popping pictures. The Decade That Rocked, a new book by rock photographer Mark Weiss, is available for purchase now. Go to thedecadethatrocked.com, where there are exclusive bundles available with extra prints, t-shirts, and even patches. Inquire about the Van Halen bundle, especially made for Dave and Dave Unchained listeners. Order today. The Decade That Rocked. It'll rock your world.
If you would like to send us a letter asking a question or making a statement or whatever you'd like to say, you can send it to ddunchainedpodcast@gmail.com.
Hey everyone, this is Eddie Trunk, and you're listening to Dave and Dave Unchained.
Need a laugh? Check out the Funny How Comedy Podcast, which focuses on upbeat conversations with legendary comedians. It's free on Spreaker and iTunes. Check us out on Facebook at Funny How Comedy Podcast, on Twitter at Funny How Podcast, on Instagram at Funny How Comedy Podcast, or email us at funnyhowcomedypodcast@gmail.com.
Just like anything else, people have differences of opinion or whatever, and, Van Halen was on an extended hiatus, and I wanted to go out and play. I didn't want to just sit around and do nothing. And Sammy put together this tour with David Lee Roth. They were calling it the Sam and Dave Tour. And he asked me if I wanted to come out and guest on a few of the shows, which I did maybe about a handful of shows on that tour with Sam. Just come out and play a few Van Halen songs. Well, let's just say that the powers to be, they were not too happy that I was doing something like that. And, I kind of got backed up against a wall. And, I wanted to go out and play. So I decided, that I'm going to go out and play. I thought I'd be waving the Van Halen flag high while there was nothing going on really with the band at the time. So, things just kind of blew up from there. And I could just kind of leave the rest to your imagination. But that's basically how it all kind of came to be.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have an incredible guest this evening. He is the author of more books than Stephen King and John Grisham combined. He's got so many titles it's impossible to list, but just to rattle off a few: Black Sabbath, Doom, Let Loose, Judas Priest, Heavy Metal Painkillers, Blue Oyster Cult, Secrets Revealed, Kickstart My Heart, a Motley Crue Day by Day, and of course, Unchained, a Van Halen user manual, and his new book, which just is hot off the presses, Van Halen, a Visual Biography. Please welcome Martin Popoff.
Hey, man, thanks for having me.
Excellent.
This is awesome. Very cool.
Absolutely. He is also, we should also mention that Martin has his own podcast called A History in 5 Songs. Congratulations on that as well.
Yeah, thanks very much. It's definitely a lot of fun. Just coming up with 5 examples of something. Usually it's a hard rock thing, and just kind of rattling it off. Usually on a weekend morning.
Absolutely.
I got to tell you, you do some deep dives on your song choices.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, listen, Martin, we can't thank you enough for coming on. Martin literally just put out a Van Halen, a Visual Biography, and let me tell you something. This is some tome that he has put together. It is a comparison to his other book. This is more photo heavy. So this is a big coffee table, thick, glossy, beautiful book. You can almost kill somebody with it. It's so heavy. It's really an incredible piece of work. And just to start off, wanted to ask you, how did the idea for this whole book come about?
Well, Weimer had started, this is my UK publisher, they started doing a lot of different photo books. And we got talking a while back about, how can we do something new where it's not just photos, like there is some text to it, but, there's a lot of bands I've written books on already, and this was a good example of that. So
right.
Our first one was actually on Blue Oyster Cult, and it was just a 20,000-word timeline because I'd already done, the wordy book on Blue Oyster Cult.
Right.
And so we did exactly the same thing here again. We just did a 20,000-word, like a really kind of detailed, granular timeline, and then the rest is photos and captions and stuff. So it's a lot of herding of cats even to just get that stuff together. But no, we've fallen into a groove. I like these timeline things. I've done lots and lots of timeline books before. Usually it's timelines with quotes, but for these, we're trying to keep it to 20,000 words so it's not too wordy, and it's just straight timeline.
Absolutely. Are you involved in the construction of all the photos and the whole layout as well?
Yeah, more sometimes, less other times. With the Van Halen, I had a lot of buddies who had shot the band, so I was kind of herding all that together. I would get lots and lots of photos from them, and then I would cull it down. So when I'm giving it to the layout guy, Andy, in the UK, he's not A, having to go through as many, and B, not picking ones that I didn't want in there. And then I also, most of the memorabilia is stuff that I, scan from my own collection or grab off the net or whatever. But again, just to sort of support the narrative, I have an entry and then I go, well, what would be a good picture to go with that entry? And then I come up with something and I tell Andy, I date the file itself.